So how do you write positive history about Joseph Stalin? The problem is that for every big positive, there's an extremely big negative. Take the industrialization of the Soviet Union, supposedly one of Stalin's greatest achievements. His supporters claim that under Stalin, the economy powered forward in the 1930s, with coal and steel production soaring ahead in record time. Even Winston Churchill said that Stalin found Russia with plows made of wood and left it in the atomic age. But that is not the whole story, and I've left Moscow to find out more. This is the breadbasket of Russia, where people remember Stalin's industrialization, but not with fond memories. Industrialization came at a terrible price. To pay for it, Stalin exported grain, and that caused places like here, in the south of Russia, what later became known as the Great Famine. Not that you would have known that from the Soviet newsreels of the time. Officially, the story was, what famine? The newsreel showed pictures of happy peasants, bumper harvests, bouncing babies. But that was a lie. Images of Stalin's Great Famine are nigh on impossible to come by. No one knows how many died. Maybe 4 million, maybe more. No one counted. But not everyone could be silenced. There was a British newspaper reporter, his name was Gareth Jones, and he travelled through the whole famine region by train. And on one of those trains, he met a communist who, following the official party line, said there was no famine. And this is what Jones wrote. I flung a crust of bread, which I'd been eating from my own supply, into a spittoon. A peasant's fellow passenger fished it out and ravenously ate it. And it was at that point that the communists shut up. Although life in southern Russia today is still simple, at least people now have enough to eat. But the older generation remember much, much leaner times. Following the Great Famine, a second after the war left Mehmet starving. What did you eat when you were little?
Mainly grass. There wasn't much else. We cooked with grass, we ate grass. My mother managed to make something out of it somehow.
But the Great Famine of '33 didn't leave Mehmet's family unscathed. All 4 of his older brothers perished. How many people do you think died in the Great Famine?
Oh, lots and lots. They died, then they'd be taken out into the yards and buried there, because people didn't have the strength to take them further away somewhere. So they were buried there, right next to the mud huts.
So how much does the positive history book devote to industrialization? 83 pages. And the famine? So, Mr. Filipov, in your book, how many pages do you spend on the Great Famine? It's a paragraph, yeah? As far as the victims of the famine are concerned, 1 paragraph.
Yes, that's right.
If Stalin is due credit for anything, it's for the way that he led his country to victory over Hitler. And that victory began here, in the city that bore his name, Stalingrad.
Crying, screaming, tears, dead bodies, severed arms, legs, and heads all around.
For 6 months, street by street, block by block, the Soviet forces beat the Nazis back.
The moaning of the wounded, it was enough to make your blood freeze.
1 million people died. This is the railway station then, and this is it now. Today it's hard to imagine that these streets were such a terrible killing field. Some of the battlefield has been left as it was in 1943, a reminder of the sacrifice made by the people of the Soviet Union in defeating Nazi tyranny. For them, this was their finest hour. To honor those who fell, young cadets changed the guard at the eternal flame. It was a people's victory, but the Communist Party grabbed the glory. This is the Motherland statue, the biggest in the world in its day. It was the very name of Stalingrad that led the two dictators, Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, to order their men to fight to the death for this city. But the strange thing is, that name, Stalingrad, it's no more. The renaming followed Stalin's disgrace after his death. Here, they even chiseled his face off the wall. It was goodbye Stalingrad, hello Volgograd. These veterans of the battle wear their medals with pride, and so they should after all they've been through. Your town is called now Volgograd. What do you think it should be called?
It was called Stalingrad when we were fighting.
Stalingrad, of course, come on.
Stalingrad, only Stalingrad.
Do you think, when people say that Stalin murdered millions, are they lying or are they telling the truth?
I wouldn't say that they were lying. Some people suffered, families. They were arrested, not by Stalin in person.
Stalin was a hard leader, a very hard and strict leader, but he was strong. What can I say? These are strong people who are capable of leading the masses. Let's face it, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs.
This is the classic justification of Stalinism, to which George Orwell replied, so where is the omelette? And let's not forget what Stalin did before the war. Back in Moscow in '39, Stalin was all smiles when the Soviet Union signed a peace pact with Nazi Germany, carving up Europe between them. A week later, when Britain declared war on Germany, Stalin left us to fight Hitler alone. Worse, for the first 2 years of the war, he sent trains loaded with petrol and wheat to the Third Reich. Only when Germany invaded the Soviet Union in '41 did Stalin start fighting Hitler alongside Britain. The Positive History textbook mentions the pact, although it adds that the Soviet Union had no choice. And I couldn't find any mention of Stalin breaking the Allies' blockade of Hitler. Where do you say in this book that Stalin helped Hitler from 1939 to '41?
You think that at all costs we have to write that between 1939 and 1941 there was trade between the Soviet Union and Germany. Am I right?
It matters very much that Stalin helped Hitler while we were fighting Hitler. The Filipov book then goes on to make an astonishing claim. And in your book you go on to say this, that in 1941 the British and the Americans continued with their policy of appeasement. Now, while that was happening, you say that's happening, Britain was fighting the Battle of the Atlantic. My father fought in that battle. It wasn't appeasement, it was a fight to the death in the Atlantic. So why have you put in this book on Russian history that the British and the Americans were continuing with their policy of appeasement? That's not true.
This refers specifically to those who expressed the idea that the Western Allies should participate as little as possible and get Germany and the Soviet Union to fight as much as possible.
This newsreel tells a lie as big as the bouncing baby in the Great Famine. Life in the Gulag archipelago was brutish, cruel and short. And there's no film at all of the executions, which peaked in the Great Terror of '37, but carried on until Stalin's death in '53. Some did survive to bear witness. Hello, hi. Susanna Pejora is one. When just 17, she and 3 boys, also in their teens, formed an anti-Stalin discussion group. The boys were shot. Susanna got 25 years in the Gulag. Her fellow prisoners died by the 100. What did they die of?
Of everything. Of hunger, of cold, of typhus. There was a lot of that. Of tuberculosis. There was a lot of that too. Psychological disorders. All sorts of things. You'd have a woman lying down to go to sleep, and the next morning she'd be dead.
Marlen Korolov spent 7 years in the Gulag. His parents were such devout communists that they named him Marlem after the first bits of Marx and Lenin. But it didn't save them.
My father was arrested in 1937 and shot in the same year, on the 29th of December. He was 36 years old. After him they arrested my mother, and when I grew up it was my turn.
Did anybody in the camp die while you were there?
Of course, what do you think? Of course, people died. And even when people died, and the bodies were removed from the camp, just before being taken away, these bodies would be stabbed with a bayonet.